Leicester and Arsenal both need something on the board. The drawn-out hum of the transfer window and the rigors of pre-season travel with dubious on-pitch benefits mean that, more than ever, August is a difficult month to draw judgment from. Yet both Leicester and Arsenal will feel under a degree of pressure to get things moving after avoidable opening day defeats. If there is an overriding sense with Arsenal of having seen this all before, then this is certainly unfamiliar territory for the defending champions. Few expect a repeat performance, but there is an appetite within the club to prove winning the league was no anomaly, and back-to-back defeats, something they did not suffer last season, would inevitably lead to questions about a title hangover. That 2 of their 3 losses in 2015-16 came against Arsenal might mean Saturday's visitors are not especially welcome, but Arsene Wenger has his own problems, and his intimation that Laurent Koscielny may be given an earlier return than planned will have sent shutters down a few signs. Much was made of Arsenal's scant defensive resources after Liverpool's quick-fire salvo saw them off on Sunday, but their opponents were hardly at full strength themselves. At some stage, the excuses need to stop, and voting at a venue where they won 5-2 last season would see the pitchforks out in North London once more. The decisive contribution from erstwhile target Jamie Vardy would certainly encapsulate current frustrations. For different reasons, both clubs need to get something on the board here. Nick aims to Friday Night Football, the latest televised revolution. If there was a referendum on Friday Night Football, would fans vote for something new or stick with the status quo? Southampton's trip to Old Trafford is the first of 10 Premier League games this season to be played on a Friday night, and change in football is always divisive. The traditional 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff is sacrosanct to those who despair at the chipping away of their well-worn routine. Others will embrace it. What better way to start the weekend? In the end, only TV ratings have a casting vote. Fans on sofas around the world are the priority, and the match-going supporter traveling from the south coast to Manchester on a Friday evening is only a consideration. On UK television there is change in the studio too. Viewers will be treated to the former presenting duo from Channel 4's Countdown, Jeff Stelling and Rachel Riley, as Sky looks to take the show in a different direction to their in-depth analysis by Garrett Neville and Jamie Carragher on the Monday. As Stelling puts it, the whole feel of the show is going to be slightly different. It's going to be slightly lighter and more humorous, a bit more fun. Love it or loathe it, Friday Night Football is here to stay. Lawrence Offaly, Guardiola and Hughes of for new twist on Old Stoke test. Manchester City's midweek dismissal of Steaua Bucharest was mightily impressive, but their visit to Stoke this weekend is an entirely different pond of ducks. Though Mark Hughes' side could only draw their first game, a visit to a promoted side, let alone one as accomplished as Middlesbrough, is a difficult first assignment, and cities should expect a difficult afternoon. It seems almost inconceivable that Guardiola can do what he's doing, change individual positions and collective style, without negatively affecting results. His players are good, but nowhere near as good, relatively or absolutely, as those he had at Barcelona and Bayern Munich. It is one thing to build confidence, as he has done with Raheem Sterling, but elemental changes take time to master. The Premier League is different to La Liga and the Bundesliga, not just because it is more frantic, but because of the players its mid-ranking teams are now able to muscle out of other leagues. Stoke away. Hughes' Stoke, not Tony Pulis's cliché, is exactly the kind of fixture where a team not yet in the group might get punished. Except Guardiola specializes in achieving the almost inconceivable. He thinks of football differently to most people, perhaps to anyone in the game today, and inspires his players to unusual heights of performance and consistency. It will be a fascinating afternoon at the Britannia. Daniel Harris for Maguire and Co. renew their nasty rivalry. The last time Watford beat Chelsea, Antonio Conte had 5 years remaining as a player at Juventus, and Walter Maguire had yet to begin his tour of Italian clubs. Evidence suggests the latter will not be able to secure the Hornets the first victory in this fixture since 1999, but there is an animosity between the pair of managers that will make it a fascinating duel. I saw a lot of myself in him when I was at Regina, Maguire wrote in his autobiography. Sincerely, I thought, I like this guy. Yet when Maguire was in charge of Napoli and Conte was managing Juve, any chance of a friendly rivalry was scuppered. Maguire even accused Conte of copying his tactics, as if 3 at the back was never used before or elsewhere. and there was an infamous meeting in 2013 when they refused to shake hands after a 1-1 draw in Naples. As usual, much focus will be placed on the dugouts rather than the pitch, but there is justifiable reason here. Alan Smith 5 Spurs may retain Jansen to add attacking intent. Mauricio Pochettino's only tactical substitution during last weekend's 1-1 draw with Everton was revealing. 10 minutes into the second half and a goal down, Pochettino brought on £17 striker Vincent Jansen for Eric Dier, and Tottenham broke out of their 4-2-3-1 shape. Harry Kane dropped behind the Dutchman to form a more attacking 4-1-4-1, with Pochettino's other summer signing, Victor Wanyama, left to occupy the holding role. The switch quickly paid dividends as Spurs scored through Eric Lamela 3 minutes later and dominated the rest of the game, illustrating how Pochettino's signings will offer him greater tactical flexibility this season. The question remains as to whether the manager will be tempted to use both Jansen and Kane from the start, particularly in home matches against opposition Spurs are expected to beat. Crystal Palace's visit to White Hart Lane on Saturday may provide an answer. Low 6 West Ham are ready to start new life in Stratford. There is not much to be said for a Europa League season that starts in July, but one thing it should do is facilitate the match fitness which gives the team the jump on its domestic rivals. For West Ham, that was made difficult by a fixture list that sent them to Stamford Bridge on the opening weekend. They lost to a late goal, not playing especially well in the process. Last season, on the other hand, Slaven Bilic's team began with a win at Arsenal, the performance which proved to them what was possible, even though, in typical style, they followed it up with successive home defeats. One of these came against Bournemouth, by 4-3. The result they daren't repeat this weekend, partly on principle but principally because Sunday marks the first domestic game at PR London Stadium. Moving is rarely easy for anyone, and football teams are no exception. Arsenal, for example, struggled playing at Wembley in the Champions League, and drew with Aston Villa and Middlesbrough before recording their first win at the Emirates. It takes time for a house to become a home, and for a stadium to become a ground, which is where that Europa League advantage comes back in. West Ham have already won in Stratford, and, given its strangeness, the experience of playing there might be easier for them than for Bournemouth. And, on top of that, they are managed by Slaven Bilic. He had his players suitably revved up for the final match at Upton Park, and Eddie Howe can be certain that the same will be so on Sunday. DH7 Williams can provide no wow to fill gaps left by Stones. Ashley Williams was paraded at Goodison Park last weekend and is likely to make his debut for Everton at the Hawthorns on Saturday, providing he is deemed fit enough to play. Signed to replace the departing John Stones, Ronald Koeman might argue Everton have made an upgrade in their defensive ranks, at least in the short term. The £35 difference in price tag between the two reflects Manchester City's investment in the future, but Koeman will immediately benefit from the top-flight know-how and leadership of 31-year-old Williams, the defender arriving at the peak of his powers after a successful 2016 Euros. We wanted to bring in a strong player in the central defense position, a player who knows the Premier League, and Ashley fits the bill for us very well, the Everton manager said of his £12M signing. He's an experienced defender and the kind of player we need in the team. He's a leader. Koeman used a back three against Tottenham in Everton's opening match, a system in which Williams thrived for Wales over the summer, and this may be the manager's preferred shape in solving their defensive problems. Of the teams to stay up last season, only Bournemouth and Sunderland conceded more goals than Everton's 55. But however Koeman chooses to set up his team, expect Williams to play the crucial role from the start. Low 8 Burnley hope for lift from new arrival before time was when a signing of Steven Defour would have been an almighty coup for one of the Premier League's lesser lights. Now it is more of a minimum requirement, but Burnley need their new £7.5M signing from Anderlecht to settle in straight away, and it raised an eyebrow when David Jones, the man whose place Defour will effectively take in midfield, was allowed to join Sheffield Wednesday almost immediately. Jones started last weekend's defeat to Swansea and played 41 times in the 2015-16 championship-winning campaign. Defour should be an upgrade, but one in, one out does not seem a sound policy for a squad this thin, and significant further surgery is still needed before the month is over. Liverpool, exuberant after last weekend's win at Arsenal, if demonstrably brittled themselves, are not ideal opponents and beginning the campaign with 2 home defeats, The match was switched from infield due to the stadium's redevelopment, would add to the sense that Burnley already have a mountain to climb. The four-star has fallen since he was linked with Everton and Manchester United earlier in the decade, but if he can shine at Burnley there will be obvious benefits for player and club. The obvious concern is that, where in the past his addition would have been cause to celebrate, as things stand it probably will not be enough. The ninth Ellen deserved his long-awaited shot in the big chair. The sartorial jokes were inevitable and stale. There was Mike Ellen, the seemingly perpetual right-hand man in shorts, decked out in a suit for the occasion, and A1 against the champions. With a squad of only 13 senior players, it is 21 years since Ellen took his first coaching role at Norwich, and it is time he deserved a proper shot on the merry-go-round. So much time spent in the shadows has left questions over his capabilities, but working day to day with players for more than 2 decades provides sufficient evidence that he can survive. Considering the grave uncertainty behind the scenes at Hull, they are yet to sign the senior players since promotion and are unlikely to in the near future. Ellen should not be counting on being permanently appointed. Takeover talks are continuing, but the post is deeply unattractive for most, and Ellen is undoubtedly keen. A win in South Wales on Saturday would strengthen his case further, but even if Swansea make it to wins from 2, there is still an argument for the most patient of no to X to be rewarded with a shot in the big chair. AS Tees where Derby a chance to show lessons learned. 7.5 years have passed since Sunderland and Middlesbrough last contested the league fixture, and the feeling before Sunday's renewal of acquaintances is certainly more buoyant than back in 2009, when Borough were relegated and the Black Cats squeezed clear of the drop by 2 points. The latter scenario is more than familiar to Sunderland supporters, but David Moyes' reign at the Stadium of Light has begun with some optimism, and they were unfortunate not to make Pep Guardiola's Manchester City bow a lot less pleasant last Saturday. Middlesbrough's home draw with Stoke fell similarly into the encouraging but room for improvement bracket. Turk Aranka heads up the hard-working side that will match Moyes' team for industry, and it would take an optimistic punter to expect this Teesware Derby to contain many goals. That match in 2008-09, the 1-1 draw at the Riverside, saw such luminaries as Alphonso Alves, El Hadji Diouf and Mito struck their stuff. This one may not look high on stardust, but a quick comparison of present and past squads might suggest that, if nothing else, lessons have been learned since then. Brighter times should, at last, lie ahead for both.